a video on the Sapphire Steel Doc Aggro build that I've been playing. And I just want to do more matchup guides. I want to get everyone ready for store champs if they wanted to run the list. I've had some amazing feedback and some people saying they want to run it. And it'll be really cool if we can see some wins and then we can get some, maybe some comments, maybe some statements or some, even if you want to send a video in, that'd be cool. And we can watch for it and just talk about everyone who's done so well with a list that's just really come out of nowhere. It's a completely new build, completely different deck. So yeah, just want to start off by saying it'd be really cool if we could get some representation if you manage to win something at store champs, and if you want to let me know, that's brilliant. But going to this video, it's the Ruby matchups. And when I say the Ruby matchups, I'm probably not going to remember, not going to mention Mufasa, the Amber Ruby Mufasa. I will just put a quick note that that matchup just feels like who's on the play wins, and there's no real way, and I'm not going to take the deck to try beat that. Um, on the play, you're just able to tempo and win the game quicker than they are, and on the draw, they're able to use Gaston and Doc to win the matchup. But I just wanted to quickly note, and I'm not going to be changing the deck completely for Mufasa because that deck's just not in the meta right now, and it's not something I worry about. But that's the only other Ruby matchup I could really think of. Of course, the two big ones that I'm mentioning is Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire. We'll start off with Ruby Sapphire because that's probably going to be the quickest one to talk about. So the matchup is just full aggro at this point. The way Lorcana's built, I don't really know why, but there's only really one hyper control or even really control deck. I mean, we did have yellow green control for a little bit, but that still didn't really hold a candle to the amount of control that Ruby Sapphire can have. So there's only one control deck, and literally every deck versus that is your matchup plan is to aggro them and try win the game as quick as you can, because no deck matches its end game. There's some builds of blue-green that do match its end game, and they can use their bounces and stuff and have fun with that, but that deck's also not really in the meta right now. I rarely see it. I just see Forgotten Mountain play it from time to time, but that's about it. So yeah, our matchup into Ruby Sapphire has to be complete aggro. We really can't play around anything when we go into this matchup. So if we get one of these one drops, we just play one of these one drops. If we get a Calhoun or a Smee, we just play Ira then. Smee is of course more optimal. But when I say if we get one of these one drops, they're a good idea to explain my point here. We'd prefer to get Robin Hood because it trades 1-for-1 with the Queen of Hearts. It threatens a shift line, which could force him to brawl on 3 ink. And Mickey Mouse is easy target for the human Sisu, the 3-cost uninkable Sisu to remove. So Robin Hood would be better, but to be honest with you just need anything on the board. You need to turn it sideways. You have to keep them busy because their game plan is they want to play a ramp card on 2, then they want to either draw or do something with Talo or maybe even ramp even more. They just really want to get to the end game as quick as they can and not lose out on a bunch of cards in their hand and keep the engine going with Hyrims and Talos and Visions and stuff like that. So really want to just put things on board, make them react to it. Of course, this is probably going to be your hardest matchup. That deck's insane, and if they get enough ice blocks and stuff like that, and Sisu out at an appropriate time, you could just be locked out of the game. And they also now have Pirate's Hive, which makes aggroing them even worse. So of course you might be able to see my disdain for the Ruby Sapphire deck. I understand its purpose in the meta, but please, I'd love to see another control deck also be able to battle it, so we're not just playing against Ruby Sapphire every time we play control matchups. Um, but yeah, our game plan, that's me complaining about Ruby Sapphire again, sorry. Our game plan is just aggro it, and we really want to push it as quick as we can. I also tend to play cards that aren't going to be removed by the big Sisu. Of course, that game plan goes out the way if you've only got that thing to play. So an optimal line might be Robin Hood into Smee, into Shift Robin Hood. So we're actually using the Shift here because now we have 2 characters that will not be removed from Sisu. And then if they've got something to challenge us, we could use a John Silver to slow them down. We could use a Pluto to bodyguard and stop the challenging, and use a P at the appropriate time for Be Prepared, and just keep going wide. And just literally every card, besides that line of 1, 2, 3, outside of that optimally, it's just play what really thinks good. And even out of this side of this line of 1, 2, 3, you can go 1, 2, and Alice will actually provide you more lore. So playing her on curve is pretty good. I sometimes like to have one after they've used a big Sisu because I'll play it down and it won't get hit by a big dragon or a Medusa or anything like that. So it's pretty good afterwards. But yeah, you just want to basically play what you have. The most optimal thing is the thing that quests for the most, to be honest with you as well. That's a really good thing to say. John Silver's very good for the Maui Shark. So you kind of want to save him for that. Of course, you can use it on a Tala as well to get another turn. You can also use it to keep the Smee alive as well. Even if they've got a tipper that we're going to run into the Smee, you could use it on that. He's pretty versatile in that sense. But just think of all the things that they have to challenge you. Of course, they have the human Maui, they have the Maui Shark, but the thing with the human Maui is he'll probably got his value by the time he's played down, so you'd have to John Silver him afterwards, and he's still got some value there. So I tend to keep it for the Shark Maui. Pete is just good to lock them out of the what's it called, the Be Prepared. So once you can kind of tell these days when a Ruby Sapphire player is leaning in towards Be Prepared, they'll stop trying to deal with your board and they'll just go towards the 7 ink cost. So you can be right, I'll play a Be Prepared on that Pete on that turn, a Pete Prepared. Play that down and lock them out. And of course Scrooge is great because Medusa and even Sisu is going to require more than just one ice block to get him. So he's a good card. Baymax is probably ink. These two are just ink. And Gantu as well. A lot of the games I've ended versus Ruby Sapphire will be a point where they've you've done your line of this Robin Hood, Smee, bigger Robin Hood, and then later on they might have done their Sisu stuff. You play an Alice, you quest and ward protect the Gantu, so they'll probably remove the Alice, but you'll get a Gantu out of it. And Peter's also remembered the Maui Shark. If they're recycling stuff, you can play it down so they can recycle it. But they won't be able to get the lore and use the card on the turn. These, of course, aren't really are for the matchups, but if you see a point where removing something would be more valuable than you playing a character, say a Maui has been played and hit a Smee, you could use the Baboom to finish it off, which means the other stuff keeps questing for a bit more turns. Strength of the Raging Fire as well, you can sometimes get 5 wide, or they might use a Maui Shark to hit something, then you can strength it. And the key component, or not key component, but a very important part of this matchup is Muktuk Mana and knowing when to use it. So they will Be Prepared and board wipe. Even playing this on curve can be very good. If you can go Robin Hood, Smee, Robin Hood Shift, Muktuk Mana, that's such an insane threat of 2/3/3s that quest for 2. You've got a mana on the board, and they just want to be busy scrying, drawing cards, and ramping. So, these 3 in combo can be very good. When I played against Ryan Walker in the LCQ pods back in Paris, we went into game 3, and by game 3 I noticed they didn't have Hideaway. They did have Mauis and stuff like that, but I kept 2 Muktuk Manas in my opener. I went 1, 2. I think I didn't play anything very strong on 3, and just went mana, and just kind of off the top played every card I had and said deal with it or deal with the manas. And you can get in this really, really demanding spot where, Muktuk Manas are down, gaining lore. There's a new character on board every turn. Can you deal with both? And, you're going to be getting lore either way. So you can get into this split threats demanding spot. But yeah, the matchup is very simple, I'd say. You can only redo your side, and it comes down to if they have it, they have it. If they have the answers, they have the answers. But yeah, you just want to find that curve, as many quests as you can get on board before the Be Prep. Muktuk Manas when the board it looks appropriate, so that tends to be after Be Prepared. John Silver to keep things alive for a little bit longer. Pete to stop the Be Prepared, and even you could stop the scrying or something like that if you think they might not have something in hand that you want. There's Dragonfire and stuff like that, or maybe you think they have a Visions or something like that. You can always just use Pete to slow them down because they do have turns where it's just heavy action. They've got How Far You Go, How Far You'll Go, How Far I'll Go, I think it's called, and then you've got Visions and stuff like that. So you can even play it on curve. So if you think they're going to ramp and then they're going to play a How Far You Can Go, you can play it, and then they go, oh wait, I can't actually do anything on this turn. You can use them in very versatile ways, and I really like Pete as a card. I've come to love him as a 4x in Steel. I think he's probably the most broken thing you can do in Steel. So very good. Pluto is very good as well, by the way, if they don't play Tipper. Otherwise, I just tend to ink him. But yeah, Ruby Sapphire matchup on the draw as well. I'm going to say it's the same game plan, but you're just going to be a turn behind. And arguably on the draw versus Ruby Sapphire is like everyone's nightmare right now, let's be honest with you. You just hope they miss turn 2 ramp, you hope they maybe miss a Hiram, they miss some draw power, but there's really nothing you can do. They're going first and they're ramping into really big threats, so you just have to do the same game plan, aggro them. If you can double spell, like I say, you can on 3 play 1 and 2, or maybe on 4 play 2, 2, or something like that, or maybe on 5 play 3, 2. That's also really good for you as well. But, it's just the same game plan, but you'll be on the draw. They're most likely going to get to the point where they can close it out. They'll get to a Maui Shark very soon on, so John Silver's pretty good stall there. If they've ramped and only played a Maui Shark, you can use John Silver, keep going wide. That might force them to use a Be Prepared and lose their Maui Shark. But overall, it's the same game plan. You're just on the draw, and it is really hard to win. I won't lie. That's probably the hardest part of the deck, is to win against Ruby Sapphire when you're on the draw. Heavy control deck. They're going to be getting to their late game a lot sooner. So yeah, that's sort of going through Ruby Sapphire, and we can go through a quick mulligan guide. Like I say, I'm just going to be very greedy in what I want here. Again, like I said, you probably would want that Robin Hood shift line. And it isn't. It can get even a bit more technical than that because if they do have an ice block out, it can be quite hard to get any value out of the Robin Hood shift line because you're shifting it on three, and then the ice block remove it with a brawl. Still, I still think you go for it. If he's only going to cost you three, that's fine. And he also gets quest on that turn. But yeah, we really want to be really aggressive and we want to keep a SME. And again, on the play, on the draw, this would be brutal because we had no one drop. We'd hope we get a one drop on the top. But on the play, again, we'll be inking, passing turn, of course, because we have to. Ink Cogsworth, anything that's already a C2 threat, you just throw in the Inkwell. This is classic Sapphire play. Sapphire Steel play is you put two, like Cogsworth always goes in the Inkwell versus Ruby. You put these down, get that down. Hopefully on three we got something a bit more important, and then maybe on four we can double spell. But if not, we'd go two, three, and then double spell both of these and just play it out there. And that could end up being a decent hand, to be honest with you, because on the play I think that could be winnable. On the draw I think you'd be way too behind about a one drop. But on the play you can got some value there because once they Maui and hit something, you've got a Calhoun to remove it. If they play Talas and make it sing, you can remove it. If they play Tippos, they can't quest of it unless you take it out. So Calhoun can actually be useful in the matchup, but I'd say this is not optimal of what we'd be wanting against Ruby Sapphire. But yeah, that's just my points on that matchup. It's a complete aggro fest. You won't be able to win late games. You want to close the game out as early as you can. Against Ruby Amethyst, the other Ruby deck, this is probably the most standard matchup, and it was the one we practiced into the most. They can get into a spot where they are just going to hyper control, bounce a Tremaine, B prep your board, and keep you locked out of the game. You have to basically win before that, or you have to be at a point where you're so threatening that you're going to win, and a Gantu sticking or a Muktak mana sticking is going to win you the game. So of course, one or two drops. We will prefer Mickey because he can challenge a Chernobog and basically forces him to pop it, and he can keep questing freely for a little bit. Robin Hood will always threaten the shift line, so it might even force a brawl on that turn, but I still think Mickey is better. Mickey is kind of one of the reasons why we play it is these purple decks. Besides the Magic Broom can kind of fold a bit to Mickey, so he's pretty good. Two, we want Smee. Smee on the play, Calhoun on the draw, just so we can start questing and Calhoun can finish up on the draw. They probably won't turn a lot of things sideways, but it's just a lot better. And Smee is a little bit. Smee questing can be a bit better. If they don't have a Chernobog out, they have no fire the cannons, they have no damage spells, they have no let the storm rage on. So that damage that Smee takes isn't that impactful to you. So either of them on the draw is fine. Again, the deck is very simple in that fact. But I'd prefer to have this on the play and prefer to have this on the draw, but either of them will do fine. And then on three, on the play, we want Alice down so we can get this Pluto lock in. And I'll just go over the play. It's the same play we have for a lot of these challenge-based decks. We want to hope that their board will be as thin as they can. Maybe they miss their Flynn. If they don't, try and finish up their one drop even if you can. They might pop it or whatever, and that's good for us because we just don't want them to run the one drop into the Pluto and pop it. I will even do things like this. If they, play a one drop, they bounce it and play a snake, and I've got a Calhoun or a Smee, I will quest with those cards so they will trade in and play the Alice on three because that means on four I can play the Pluto and then they might play a Sisu, but they'll have to one for one the Sisu into the Pluto. And your hand size would be so small they can't even one for one it, so they'll even have to use a crab buff or they might even just not have an answer for it and you could just freely quest. So I always want to get that one drop and two drop. I want to always make the board as thin as I possibly can, so when the Pluto lock happens, it's a very big challenge for them to actually remove it, and it requires a bit more intuition than just hit it because it's a 5/5 of ward and it has bodyguard. So yeah, I'm always trying to make the one and two turns as thin as I can for my opponent's board, and that sometimes will require that I quest with a Smee and they run a snake into it or a Flynn or whatever it is, and that's just going to have to happen. You'll even get to the points as well where they might have a Flynn and you have a Calhoun out. You quest with the Calhoun and they've only got the Flynn, but what they'll do is quest Flynn, bounce it with a Fox, run it in, and then they've got nothing on board. So now the Alice Pluto lock is a lot stronger at that point as well. So yeah, you kind of want to get to that spot where Alice Pluto will be as effective as you possibly can. On the draw, again, we look at John Silver and Pete. I kind of look at playing John Silver down to stop a challenge, maybe get another quest in to get a bit more lore, and then the next turn maybe get to 4 characters so we can sing a strength and take out a Sisu. On the draw, it can be quite hard. They kind of miss a bit of tempo. If they're going to go Chernobog, Flynn, Sisu, Genie, like that's just an insane line on the play, and I'm pretty sure every deck folds to that, or maybe not Ruby Sapphire, but like most decks fold to that. That's just the best line you can. So you're hoping they miss like the Flynn, or they miss the Sisu, or they miss the Genie, or they miss the one drop, and you can just tempo your way in, because all you're hoping to do is play a character every turn, and if they miss one of their key components, you can kind of get in there, and that's sort of what we're hoping to do. But yeah, on the 4, you want to play the Pluto to get the bodyguard down, or the Scrooge. I find Pluto as well in this matchup, if you don't have the Alice, can be quite brutal because of Brawl. They'll run something in, then Brawl it, and then your Alice is free to be hit by a Fox, so that's kind of scary. So I might look at playing a Scrooge instead, or I might be looking to play a Calhoun and a Doc and double one drop. McDonald's, McDuck Manor. All right, we got that one in the end. On curve is always pretty rough. On the play, you could kind of maybe cheese it out and um, split threats, but they're going to have foxes and crabs. And what we really want is we want it so when they run something into our thing, or their thing also dies, or gets banished, sorry, also gets banished as well as our thing gets banished, which is, well, it's going to happen. Nothing gets banished anyway. But if we're playing a McDuck Manor, they'll just like fox. They'll do a hit it, bounce with the fox, hit it, and remove it, or move it over 2 turns if required. And we haven't took anything off their board. Their foxes are still lingering around. So really, this is a card to use after Be Prepared, the same as the Ruby Sapphire matchup. Yeah, and we want to curve out to a Gantu. Gantu is really strong in this matchup. If you've got the Pluto lock set up, they will run through the Pluto, but the Gantu will be untouched. And this also means that the Elsa that they use to exert things can't get the Gantu. We lock on a bit more lore. And to be honest with you, I've got to points where if you were to go 1 drop, 2 drop, Alice quest, Ward Pluto, full quest, play Gantu, um, you can get to a point where your opponent will just concede because it's turn 6 or whatever, and you're at 14 or 16 lore or whatever. Sorry, I didn't do the maths quickly there, but if you've had Smee questing for a bunch of turns, your 1 drop besting, Alice will quest twice and then can quest again for the Gantu. It's just so much lore. So yeah, that's always the line to go for, is Robin Hood, 2 drop, Alice, Pluto, Gantu on the play. On the draw, you kind of want to try and go a little bit more wider and play 1 drop, 2 drop, and then one of use 2 utility cards. One of these if it fits the sort of style you're going. If it fits the sort of play pattern, if you think you can get value out of Pluto, if you think they're just going to run a 1 drop in and then play Brawl in it, don't. Scrooge is good because he 1/1s Maui, and he also doesn't get removed from the Fox, so he's also good to play. And then yeah, try get to the Gantu, try get as much lore as you can, and Mukduk Manus after Be Prepared. And the removal cards, there isn't many targets for it. If they're racing you, or the 3 cost Sisu is looking quite troubling because they could shift it. Strength for the Raging Fire is pretty good to use there as well. But overall, yeah, these are just removal cards for other matchups really. And I've even had games where, again, the deck, I put this on Twitter, the deck quite preys on your opponent missing tempo. And I've had that recently where I even got to do the Alice Pluto lock because they did 1 drop and then they bounced Snake. You removed Snake, one of these. They just hardcast Friends on 3. Because let's be honest, Ruby Amethyst, that's not uncommon that they miss their free drop. They have Sisu and then they might have a Crab, but they don't really want to play the Crab on 3. So they might just miss it and have to hardcast the Friends. And then I was able to go, hold on, I've got Alice Pluto in hand. I'll put the Alice Pluto lock in. I was on the draw, but we got so much lore, and then we get to lock them out of the game with Mukduk Manors. So it can still be done on the draw as well, this lock, but it requires they don't have the Janabog, Flynn, Sisu, Genie. If they do, they're just going to trade in and remove it very easily. So yeah, that's sort of the rundown of the Ruby Sapphire matchup. I'll just go through a quick mulligan guide of that as well. New game. Again, this is quite a boring hand, so we'll just send it all back and do a Smee. And if you're on the play, you can definitely go for Inca Cogsworth, because I'm always worried about Big Sisu, even in Ruby Amethyst. Play the Robin Hood, whatever you draw next, get the Smee out. You could shift it and sing, or you can shift and trade. But on the play, your Robin Hood shift line is pretty much locked in. They can't answer it. It will happen, which is always a struggling thing for Ruby Amethyst, unless someone's playing like Pinocchio or something like that. So you could go for that and or you could just shift it and keep turning sideways, or whatever you really think looks best. If they've got a Sisu out, they'll kind of struggle. They could hit it and then Fox bounce and then hit it. That could remove it. If you wanted to take out like a Flynn or something, you could sing the strength. But yeah, I would just go 1, 2. It's basically every turn looking at your hand. If you don't have the Alice Pluto line and it doesn't look like the lock will stick on the board, it's looking at your hand and thinking, what's the most valuable thing I can do? How much lore can I actually get this turn? How much lore can I set up? And that's really what you want to be doing when you have a hand like this, where the line isn't particularly that clean cut. But here, we've got quite a few good components here. I think I'm gonna keep the Calhoun for now because we'll say this is on the draw. If this is on the draw, this is a good example. What I would do here is keep these two, so we can mulligan them away. Oh, we've got some interesting stuff here. So we draw a card to begin with. I'd get the Mickey Mouse out, and then ink whatever, and get the Calhoun out or the Smee. Doesn't really matter. It depends on what they've got on their board. I think I'd want Calhoun more to start chasing up any free quests, and then we can get to a point where we can play a Robin Hood and a Smee on turn 3. So now we're going 2 characters wide, and then the next turn we can play the Alice, and then we can quest and ward up the Gantu because we'll be playing her on turn 4. And you can do sort of lines like that, which are very interesting. We've also got a John Silver here that would be quite fun to stop a challenge for a turn, but I still think this line's better. So you get the Mickey out on turn 1, the Calhoun on turn 2, and on turn 3 you can get the Smee and the Robin Hood out, and then the next turn you could Alice and ward up the Gantu, hopefully if you draw the Inkables, of course. And that's sort of what you're doing, the tempo of they play a Genie or whatever, or they play a Sisu, but you play 2 characters and you're actually questing for 3 that turn as well, if those characters quest. So that's kind of how I like to do it on the draw. You out-tempo them, you play the value of having the extra card from the draw, so going second, suddenly you've got some value out of it. Of course, they're going to get to be prepared before you kind of close the game out, if they draw be prepared, of course. And then you're going to have to rely on Look Duck Manners, maybe get some docks to start flooding the board. And it's really the game plan of the deck that is quite common in every matchup, is you're going to get to a point where you have to play the value of the top decks. And the deck is quite built to be valuable in the top decks. If we look at all of these 5-drops here, and if we're mulliganing for our cheaper characters, so through this hand, we've got a lot of our cheap stuff gone. We've got 1 Gantu, of course, but we're going to hopefully play it. And then from there, this percentage of drawing these cards have gone down, except for the dock, which is good for us. And then the percentage of these cards goes up because we haven't drawn them yet. And we're kind of get to a point where we're going to top deck some good stuff, and we're just going to say deal with this every turn. And the only issue against Ruby Amethyst is they can get to a point where they'll beef up the boards. That's fine. That's not the problem. Ruby Sapphire does that as well. We deal with that. But if they get to a point where they can play a Tremaine and play a Snake and just bounce Tremaine, maybe they've got 2 Tremaines or whatever, it can be quite rough at that point. That's the only time the matchup will ever feel very, very bad, I think. Of course, if you can get to a point where the Maui they play, maybe they play a 5-cost Maui, 1/1's your Pluto, that's also good as well. But it's really this give and take. You're trying to get as much lore as you can. You're always going to be the one who's questing because you can't let the game go too long. If you stall and don't do anything for a turn, they will just sit there and draw cards because they're purple. So I'm always trying to be proactive in these matchups as well. But yeah, on the play, I think it's very clean cut of Alice Pluto lock. On the draw, like I said, try to do these double spells, which is pretty good. But that's sort of a rundown of the Ruby matchups and how I like to play them. And yeah, I hope some of that's useful.